Okay, guys, I don't know why this is always happening, but there's always a good story about a dog. So this time it's not my Stella story about the dog, but a story about something very much more interesting. I had an opportunity to visit a lot of friends this past weekend, and one in particular, she lives in a great open space area with not very many neighbors in the open space. And at 3 a.m. in the morning, her dog Thunder had to go outside. And of course, she's like elbowing her husband. It's like, I'm not going outside at 3 a.m. It's your turn. You go for it. And, a few pokes here and there. He finally gets out, gets his slippers on, the bathrobe, and goes outside to take Thunder out. And Thunder is trained, so he does his thing, and they have electrical fence where they can, contain the dog with little supervision. But they always have a person out there after hours because it is coyote land. It's very known coyote land. So she says she wakes up to the sound of danger, danger, come back here, danger. And she's like, what is going on? What's danger? So she instantly thinks there's danger around. So she jumps off the bed and she's going on, where's danger? So outside there's danger. She's screaming danger. She's in complete haze, knowing her dog is Thunder. So it's not thunder, it's danger. So they're going between thunder and danger. The both voices happen outside. And apparently what happened is the neighbors got a new pup and his name is Danger. So Danger and Thunder had a play date at 3 a.m. and got the whole neighborhood up on their tippy toes. And oh my goodness, what a creative way to have to give to your pups. It never ceases to entertain the entire neighborhood after hours. So do pick well.
That's a horrible name for a dog because you're going to be yelling that all the time. Danger! Get over here!
And everybody's looking around. Where's the danger? Where's the danger?
That's exactly. Yes, and I told her I'm totally stealing your story because I have to retell it. And next time I have a dog, I'm naming it Danger, unless there's a better story out there. Oh,
Wow.
well, on that note, welcome to Rekindle XM. We are your hosts. I am Masha Bobo. With me are Brian Gatchell and Michelle Gatchell. Welcome as we talk about the life as an onion and burnout onion. So when you think about your life, and we're going to use an analogy referencing to an onion and how onions grow, you start with a sprout and a bulb. And as you have your experiences and responsibilities in life, the connections you make, the environments and the culture, the belief systems and circumstances that shape around you, it will grow and shape a nice, healthy onion. And those experiences are good experiences and bad experience. Like a healthy onion will make you cry just as much as an unhealthy onion. It will definitely make you cry. And I'm definitely a crier, any kind of an onion, and it's waterworks. My daughter makes fun of me because I have the ski goggles when I cut my onions. It's a whole project when we do make things with onions. And the sad thing is we love onions. So I have my gear ready to go. And there are some blackmail photos on my kid's phone as she can't resist the urge to catch mom doing something very weird she can brag about to her friends. So I wanted to bring this topic to you guys and see what your experience is with a good, healthy onion and how those experiences shape to and contribute to this analogy.
My analogy is Shrek. My life is like an onion. You have to peel back the layers to get to know me.
I'll have to.
I can attest there's many. There's many layers to peel back.
Oh, well, I'm sure I quoted that wrong, but anytime I hear life is like an onion, I think of Shrek.
I do like that analogy. Sometimes we tend to think about our life in compartments, and I sort of like that idea of thinking about it more as layer after layer as we go through life, because that makes sense as you add life experience. Some are really sweet, and you have that sweet part of the onion. Some are perhaps not so sweet, but all of it contributes to this very interesting flavor.
I agree. I can totally relate to that. Is on a professional side, not very many people know a side of me that my friends and family know, and my kid knows completely different side that most don't know. And you really have to do peel those layers to get to know the person once you do have that walk in the relationship with them. But how are our onions shaped by things like belief systems and circumstances?
That's a great question. And I think this is where we often don't realize the layers, because a lot of times we have our opinions, we have our um, our beliefs, and we don't really go back to what's at the core of those. What were we taught when we were younger? What did we take with us into our work life, into our relationships? Um, Very often we just see the surface result, and we don't go back to see, well, what's under these layers of things. So um, yeah, I think beliefs, culture, environment, all of those are big contributors to the onion and how the onion forms.
So I guess that's a difference between your red onion and yellow onion and green onion.
Yep. And I am a big fan of the red onion. Yeah, I know they make you cry, but I love that flavor. Are you a red onion, Brian?
No. Well, I don't like them anyway, whether I am or not. That's another story. You would have to tell me that, dear. I don't know. But the only onion I enjoy is the green ones and the cooked white
Mm.
and some good stir fry.
Those fried onions. Oh my goodness. I'll tell you what, I don't care what kind of onion it is. Fried onion is a very semi-healthy addiction. You can tell it's an onion, but it is fried.
A good white onion on the grill is definitely good, but I don't think there's ever a good red onion. It's just too
Mm.
sour, too bitter
Mm.
to me.
Sadly, everything is that is most healthy for us is usually not as delicious as the other stuff.
Are you trying to say the red onion is better than the white onion?
That's what I heard, but not my words. Some research. Anything that is a purple color, a deep red purple color, has have significant more nutritional value. But we can ask one of our doctors at an interview that will be coming soon.
It is interesting. I've heard that too. So we'll see what an actual health professional says. But I do think that red onions have a really interesting depth to their flavor. And Brian may not appreciate that, but I definitely do. And I was kind of thinking about taking it back to our example, how sometimes life experiences, we have good ones, we have bad ones, but they do add to the depth of our, the flavor of our lives in a sense. So I personally prefer red onions, and Brian says, yep, just don't kiss me after you eat that.
And garlic.
Well, if you eat it together, it won't make a difference. You can still kiss. You're just gonna have to put it in.
Nope.
Oh.
That takes me to a quote of a 20th century poet and writer, Carl Sandburg. And he says, life is like an onion. You peel it off one layer at a time, and sometimes you weep. Oh my goodness, what a great reference that is. And if I
Yes.
reflect on a neutral onion of my life, it could be a good, healthy environment and a good, healthy onion. That is my life. But when you start peeling things around, there could be some good experiences and some bad experiences in life. Some can make you cry. It doesn't mean that you're completely off balance, but those things that should take note if there are some triggers along the way, perhaps one should spend a little bit more time investigating those before the onion goes bad. But before we talk about that, what are your thoughts about the good and bad experiences shaping up the onion, and what are the um, your thoughts about certain layers going bad?
Well, I think that's true in anything in life. I mean, when the onion is growing, they're going to have, it may not get as much water during part of its growth process. So it's going to be a little bit thinner in one layer, and it may be a little more sour or bitter. Or another section, it could have gotten plenty of water that time. And so it's going to be a little bit thicker layer, and it'll be nice and sweet. If it's a good white one, red one's still going to suck. But anyway, I'm sticking to that one. You're not going to change my mind. And I think that's with us and with like any plant or animal, there's good times and bad times, and it definitely shapes on how we react to things. Like if you have a pet that you got from a shelter or not, it could have been abused. And so it takes a lot of nurturing to get it out of that bitter, narrow onion phase. And it could be a lifetime because it could have been in it a long time. So there's definitely good and bad. It's just where it falls and how you deal with it.
And what's interesting to me is, kind of going back to the onion, it's such a surprise. I like that quote because he's saying, sometimes you weep, not always. And you kind of never know until you get into the interior of an onion how potent that onion's going to be. It's always a bit of a surprise. And I think sometimes that's true in our own lives is, we have all these layers, and sometimes it's a surprise to ourselves when we actually go and investigate and really take a look at what's going on inside of us. And with our busy lives, between all of the things of balance, often we don't take a good look at what is underneath the surface. And sometimes we are equally surprised when we actually do look deeper.
Yeah, and I tell you, there's nothing more frustrating than going to the store and picking out your onions, and they look nice and ripe and nice and juicy, and you come home and you get ready to cook, you cut into the onion, and bam, there's just rot. And of course, like me, I buy one onion when I cook a dinner versus getting a bag of onions. So to me, it's a frustrating experience because now the onion has to be either salvaged for parts that are salvageable and the rest thrown away. So I learned to buy more onions. But if you think about exactly what you're talking about is sometimes we don't wear what's on the inside on the outside, and we may look and present ourselves like, well, like everything's peachy, the life is perfect, there's work-life balance, I got my career figured out, I got my kids in order, I got all the extracurricular activities going up, you got that superhuman powers going, and everyone just applauding and using you as an example. But when you go deeper into the layers, there could be that rot, and we referencing rot as stress levels that potentially turn into long-term stress and turn into burnout. So now we're talking about a burnout onion and how we can be unwell on the inside, but wear a really nice exterior shell with a smile, presenting to the world that everything's well and peachy. What do you guys think about that as a burnout onion and our environment and stigma contributing to us having to show up at our best without really addressing the core issues of what's causing harm?
Well, one, I think when burnout enters your life, so you've had stress for such a long time that you may not recognize the stress as burnout, so the long-term stress, it creates a layer over that life experience that anything after that is going to be impaired by it. And generally, if you're in that layer, that stress is continuing on in each layer, so you're still getting more stress and more stress and more stress. Sometimes it's easily removed, sometimes it's long-term stress again. But You may think that your outside layer is showing nice and prim and pristine, but anybody who sees you knows that there's something going wrong if they've known you for any length of time. So what you think you're presenting is different than the burnout onion that you're showing.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen both examples. So I've seen an example of someone who would never tell you they're burned out, but when you look at them, when you talk to them, it's so evident that they are burned out and that for whatever reason they are sticking around, with those golden handcuffs. They're too close to retirement to want to start over, but you just look at them and you're like, oh my goodness, you are so burned out. But then on the other hand, you have some of the most high performing people you'll ever work with. And yet you find out, after the fact that that person was completely burned out. Like maybe they just all of a sudden they're gone. They've left your organization. Everybody's sitting there going, well, where'd they go? They were great. Everything they were working on was fine. What happened? Why did they leave? And what you often find out is that there was burnout underneath that. And they really had gotten to that point where they could no longer keep the outside of that onion looking good, and so they were out.
Let me ask you the question to that then is, how well did you know that person? Because all you saw was the outer layer of them doing their job the way they were supposed to and looking happy, as Masha was saying, showing the face of a pristine onion. But if you didn't know them very well, you'd only see that and then you'd be shocked. But I'm still arguing that
True.
it may look pristine to you, but to anybody that really knows you, it's not.
Well, I can totally relate to that, but Michelle, why don't you finish your thought there?
I completely agree with you because Masha and I we worked very closely together. We did know how we were doing, and the rest of the world probably didn't. I do remember a few different situations where one or the other of us was projecting this confident program manager. We've got things under control, but then we'd get away together, just the two of us, and one of us was breaking down. So, to your point, Brian. Yes, if you know someone well, you typically can see those clues. What's interesting to me is that this thing we call burnout, this burnout onion, it shows up so many different ways. And you're right. If you're looking closely, there are usually clues, but not everyone's going to see them.
Particularly in the work environment, you don't want to see them. You just want them to do their job.
Right. And we're not encouraged to be that authentic. When you show up to work, there's a certain image that you should project, and we're taught that you show up, you look confident, you appear at least that you have everything under control, and you don't outwardly show that stress to the vast majority of people.
It's more than an image, it's an expectation.
Agreed.
And because it is an expectation, that is what led me to my burnout. And to your point, not many people knew I was struggling, including my family and loved ones, despite me actually saying the words like, I am struggling. I cannot keep up. Yes, my car is dirty. Yes, I cannot change a light bulb. No, I cannot mow my lawn most of the days. Sometimes I have to, right? But it was the expectation of go, go, go. It is the false. You adopt the identity of a superhero syndrome, and it's a false belief where you can do everything because you have to. That is the hat that you wear all the time, and it's exhausting. And it's some layers of me, without really me recognizing, they were rotting. They were neglected. They were compost. Where other layers were, a nice shell. I did not wear my burnout on my face or on my body physically until I fell physically ill. And then I was showing all of that stress and burnout and all the rot of the layers from the inside out. And that was a very scary place, because if you are not tending to those layers and recognizing, oh, I'm struggling with my exterior environment or my relationships or my family or spiritually, like whatever those layers are. And so do the inventory of your layers frequently and really understand how well you're doing, because it's very easy to come out from short-term burnout into long-term burnout and end up in a complete full burnout, which is really difficult to recover from. We can also look the part when we're off balance and in state of disease. We covered that, I think, pretty extensively. But if we look a little bit further, how do outer layers of burnout show up? And they do show up cognitively, emotionally, and physically. And we will be doing a deeper dive on each one of those topics in the coming episodes. But what's important when you are, if you think you are in burnout, or if you think that you are heading into full burnout, or you're already there, is to start with an inventory of your layers, of your environments, of your internal health, and really understand how you're doing and understand what are the root cause of those particular symptoms that you may be experiencing. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I think you're right that usually what we see, this outer layer of burnout, can show up several ways. Sometimes we never know about it looking from the outside. So, for example, what I said earlier about someone who just leaves a company suddenly, sometimes that's because of burnout. But sometimes it does actually show up, because if you leave an onion, you've gone to the store and you've found those onions that have definitely been laying around too long, because the inner layers have worked their way out and you can see it on the outside. Eventually this will happen with burnout if it continues on. So for example, I knew a wonderful lady, and she was in the banking industry. They were overworking her. I don't even remember. She was managing like several different branches, running from one to the other. She was working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. And eventually what happened is one day she literally had no short-term memory. So she had that cognitive. Eventually that was the way it came out, was the cognitive. So, that's just one example of what can happen on the cognitive side.
And we have a close friend, a business owner, who was in a superhero mode for way too long. And he is just in his 50s, very athletic, takes good care of himself, breadwinner, has a really nice home in a gated community in Colorado. And one of those, you look at and be like, whoa, you got it all. You got it all figured out. You got it all balanced, like high energy. He presents very well. And I was having dinner with my family, and he calls, and he's in a hospital, and we were all in shock. Well, what's going on? You are a stellar example of a healthy, successful business owner. What happened? So of course we're all tuning in and trying to figure out how we can help. He went into the hospital with cardiovascular symptoms, thinking he's having a heart attack. Have not had any symptoms at all, not on any medications except for vitamins. And we were like, wait, what? You're having a heart attack in your 50s? Like, what's going on? And he calls back a few hours later, and he said, that wasn't a heart attack. That was an anxiety attack. And everybody thought that he was about to, have a cardiac event, another one in the hospital after, presenting to the hospital with those severe symptoms. Calls back a little later and said, I have other symptoms. He is in full-blown fibromyalgia. He can't move. Not alone can he, function. He's having a panic attack that resembles a heart attack. He can't move. He can't put a shirt on. He can't even pick up a pen and write anything down. It's a struggle for him to hold the phone to his head. And we were all in shock. Well, whoa, what's going on? Of course, it sounded very familiar to me, minus the cardiac episode. And I was like, oh, well, stress will do that. And of course, they send him home saying, you got to take it easy. And, you got to take some time off work. You can't work. You just got to rest and rest and rest. But that's an example of physical, how it just happens suddenly. You don't see it coming a lot of the time. It will strike you like a lightning and you'll be wondering, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah, I've heard that story before as well. And, that seems to be a very common one where you have these very successful looking people and then boom, they're in the hospital in the ER and they think they're having a heart attack. One of the other ways it can show up too, though, is also emotional. And I would say that for me, this was probably where my burnout came out because I did have some physical symptoms. I think most people in burnout will have some, but they weren't stopping me. They were not bad enough to stop me in my tracks. I wasn't really having cognitive symptoms other than just feeling tired, but emotionally, there was just this, oh my goodness, I just feel stressed, so thin, and I'm at that point where I feel like I'm just going to fly apart. So there's also that aspect of the emotional side of it where your symptoms could come out emotionally.
Yeah, but you had more than just emotional. I mean, you almost had to take your gallbladder because of the stress levels. And I I don't can't say that my gallbladder was necessarily from stress, but my gallbladder is gone. But we both are not as much as we used to, but we're both living on omeprazole, so to reduce the acid in our stomachs. I mean, there are some effects that it's just hard to get rid of once you start going into that burnout direction. I gained a lot of weight. I got diabetes. I probably would have had it anyway because it's really prevalent in the family, but it could have been later in life than what it was. So, and that's not to mention that I had probably a lot of anger towards the end of my burnout before I walked away from engineering. So there was a lot of things to work through. There was a lot of emotional and physical. And as I was working through the burnout, there was cognitive. It took me a long time to be able to want to focus on anything once I finally walked away and I started resting and getting the chance to start healing.
And thanks for sharing those stories. I can also relate to that because after my physical burnout, I had significant cognitive function impairment as well as emotional. And it was a very long journey. Some things, yes, I recognize, and I could have pivoted into a different situation and take better care of myself in that sense. But there were some stressors that came into my life that pushed me, that was a catalyst into the physical and cognitive burnout. Not a fun state to stay in, and we definitely urge our listeners to take action for themselves and pivot. Listen to your intuition. Take time for yourself. PTO is permitted. It's there for you to use when you're healthy, not when you're sick. So do make good use of that and take good care of yourself, because good care of yourself is your responsibility. No one's going to come to the rescue and pull you out of burnout. It is quite a journey. So how do we heal the burnout layers? That's one of my favorite topics, because now we know about the onion and life onion and the burnout onion, but what do we do? How do we peel the layers and get back on track?
So in reference to Shrek, it's now burnout onion, and we want to peel those layers and get rid of them.
Yeah, and I think this is where it gets interesting, because if you look at the research on burnout, they talk about some of the causes, but it's pretty limited. They talk about certain things happening in the workplace. So if you know you're in burnout, you're having some kind of symptom, whatever it is, whether it's physical, emotional, cognitive, but what's actually happening underneath that is a whole different situation. And usually it's not just one thing, it's usually multiple things, multiple layers that are happening, and you're only seeing the end result of that when you're so far into burnout that you have to do something. But there's some work to do to figure out what all of those layers are.
Yeah, we don't want to just think that the last thing that put us into what we recognize as burnout is actually the only burnout that you have, because there was a lot of things that led up to this, and that was just the tipping point. So we definitely, when we're looking at burnout, we definitely want to start looking back and trying to figure out where it came from. Michelle is in her black belt Six Sigma stuff is always, she gets always really excited on root cause analysis. Drives me nuts. So, but besides that, and I'll quit squirreling and probably cut this part.
But
so, go ahead.
Okay, Brian, I know you don't like the fact that I geek out on this whole like Six Sigma and finding the root cause of the problem. There's good reasons for that, because I worked in fields where I absolutely had to do that because there was a lot of fixing to be done. But it is often true in life that before you can really go forward, you have to go back and figure out what's happening. I mean, that's why we have a whole branch of medicine called psychology, that where we have therapists who help us to do this, because there are multiple layers and you got to go back far enough to figure out where did something start. And then of course you want to try to regrow the onion once you get off all the bad layers.
And thanks for pointing that out. Working with therapists is definitely always a great idea. And I'm a believer, whether you're healthy or not, mentally or physically, everybody needs a therapist. I have seen some great results, which shortened up the recovery timeline. You don't have to use a therapist. There's a negative connotation associated with our culture using a therapist. I tend to grow out of that. I did think that if I have a therapist, that something's really wrong with me, and I never want to admit it. But the reality is that it is an avenue that, if you can, definitely take. If you can't, there are other ways and other tools available to you to do on your own, but be ready. It's going to be more time consuming because you are traveling the journey on your own, which is going to require for you to do the root cause analysis on your own, which often requires more research versus being observed and presented with some Q&A, and you just have those revelations then and there, and you can take action then and there. So yes, it is a self-investment, whether you go with a therapist or whether you go with figuring this out on your own. You can do it. We empower you to do it. And one of those tools is a wheel of life. Michelle, do you want to tell us about a wheel of life?
The Wheel of Life is a commonly used tool with life coaches and many other self-development experts. What it really does is it helps you identify areas where you're out of balance, and it helps you look at your overall layers of life. So we've been talking about, the onion and the layers of life. So typically you look at somewhere between 8 and 10 layers. It could be things like, okay, your family health, your spirituality, your finances, your career, et cetera. All of the categories or areas that are important to you in life. And then you rate them, whether you're doing well or not so well. And it helps you narrow down where to look. And with burnout, typically we tend to think of it as something that's related to our careers. But for many people, it's not just their careers. And if you actually look at the different areas of your life, you may find that other areas are contributing. For example, maybe you have a family member who's very ill, and you realize that you love your family member, you're trying to do your best to take care of them, but that is adding a huge layer of stress on top of a demanding career. That's not an uncommon story. So the idea is, don't just look at your work life, look at what's going on in the other areas of your life. And then another tool that's commonly used is the 5 whys. And this is what we call root cause analysis. So you're burned out. You ask yourself, well, why am I burned out? And you answer that question. And maybe your answer is, well, because I'm working 60, 70 hours every week. Okay, well, the next question then is, why am I working 60 or 70 hours a week? And you go through this process until you get down to what you feel like is at the very core of that. And often it's going to be a belief, a mindset. It could be other things as well. But the idea is you're kind of digging deep into, okay, what is causing this? So that's just a couple of quick examples, but that helps us peel off these layers and get back to, okay, where am I healthy? And then let's find some miracle grow and regrow that onion.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing. Those are valuable tools that anybody can start using at any moment to start taking action, investigating their onion. And I think one of the major takeaways from today, besides the tools one can use, is the message is water your onion. So thank you for joining us today, and join us at the next episodes as we go deeper with our guest doctor speakers to go and investigate burnout on a whole new level. Help us reach 1 million hearts by subscribing, liking, and sharing our content if you find it helpful and insightful.